rats caught on camera scurrying through an Irvine neighborhood. People who live there say it's becoming unbearable.
They called it absurd Los Angeles building robotic cats to scare rats. Overnight, the jokes wrote themselves. Chrome tabbies stalking alleys. Blade Runner, but for dumpsters. Headlines mocked, memes multiplied, and no one asked what came next. So the fix began quietly, far from the spotlight that mocked it. No speeches, no countdown, just silent machines learning the same streets where the problem lived. After all, this wasn't a stunt. It was strategy. Los Angeles wasn't trying to be clever. It was trying to outsmart a problem that had already memorized us. Because beneath the laughter, the city never relaxed. The scratching behind drywall didn't go on break. The darting shadow near the dumpster didn't care about headlines.
The problem is the flies, the maggots, the stink, the smell, and the rats.
The real Los Angeles stayed uneasy, soft, twitching, always waiting for the next tiny intrusion. The robots weren't built to hunt. They were built to shift the entire rhythm of the street. And what happened next proved just how deeply behavior could bend when the right kind of presence arrived. Stay with us, because the strangest part isn't that it worked. It's why Los Angeles needed a new kind of predator. Los Angeles didn't turn to robotic cats because it wanted to be quirky. It did it because rats had already mastered the city. Not through boldness, through observation. Every tiny human habit became a doorway. A trash lid left cracked open, a back door propped during a rush, a warm vent that turned into a nightly highway. The city ran on routine, and rats learned that routine better than we did. Traditional fixes only made things worse. Poisons dimmed hawks and owls, sickened pets, and contaminated water without changing behavior. Traps filled, but the scratching returned. People banged lids like it meant something. But rats weren't afraid of noise. They were experts at patterns. And as long as the city behaved the same way every day, they flourished. So Los Angeles needed a different kind of pressure. Something that didn't kill, didn't poison, didn't wreck the ecosystem, and didn't let rats feel comfortable in daylight. That meant studying predators not as hunters, but as communicators. Cats, it turns out, teach caution through posture long before claws ever matter. The angle of an ear, the stillness of a shoulder, the quiet claim of a corner. Predation is a language, and the city needed to speak it. That's where the machines came in. Engineers realized the robots didn't need to chase anything. They just needed to project presence. So they built movement the way a cat uses it. Tail as authority, ear angle as boundary, stillness as warning. Servos were quieted until footsteps felt more like pressure in the air. Sensors layered thermal signatures, motion vibrations, and ambient acoustics into a patient, watchful awareness. These weren't toys, and they weren't traps. They were signals, mechanical silhouettes that made rats hesitate. To make them believable, the team obsessed over details. Thousands of hours of slow motion, feline footage, redesigned actuators, softened servos, synthetic pelts infused with gentle deterrent scents that didn't harm the food web. Everything had to feel natural without pretending to be nature. And then came the real test out of the lab and into alleys that didn't care how many degrees of ear tilt the engineers had perfected. Because a body, no matter how brilliantly built, means nothing until it meets a world that's been training itself against us for decades. But blueprints don't earn trust. Streets do, and the first nights proved exactly how much the machines still had to learn. Prototypes, first nights, and the path to trust. Moving from workshop floors to backlot trials, the early models proved wonderfully wrong. The first stood too tall, looming like sculptures instead of silhouettes. The second glided quietly, but turned with a clumsy curiosity that read more playful than predatory. Each flaw revealed what rats noticed most: proportions, tempo, and the meaning behind hesitation. Engineers adjusted mass, smoothed balance, and retimed every shift of weight. A slightly slower head turn conveyed consideration. A delayed foot plant signaled readiness. The units began to feel less like crafted objects and more like presences. While the machines learned caution, data teams mapped the city's hidden rhythms. Years of sanitation logs, delivery timetables, and lighting patterns revealed a lattice of reliable rat corridors. The seams between warehouses and alleys, the shadowy edges of restaurant patios, the storm drain lips where warmth and darkness met. The city had written the pattern. The machines would learn to underline it. Transitioning from rehearsal to deployment, Los Angeles chose a brutal but honest pilot district, an industrial zone feeding half the city before dawn. At 3 o'clock in the morning, crews placed the units under loading docks and along familiar rat highways. Once activated, tails adjusted, heads lifted, and each machine settled into a patient stillness that worked like a quiet announcement. This space is claimed. Rats tested their roots. They hesitated. That alone shifted the math. By sunrise, heat maps showed thinner pathways, lighter traces. No theatrics, just credibility. But moving from one altered district to a citywide system required something rare in municipal innovation: public consent. Transitioning from success to scale, officials held alley demonstrations, let residents watch units in motion, and opened the software to scrutiny. Questions reshaped features: gentler lighting for neighborhoods, sturdier housings for waterfront wind, dust-hardened exteriors for downtown corridors. The rollout grew not by volume, but by precision. A handful of units in the right places could shift behavior more effectively than a flood of machines in the wrong ones. What no one foresaw was what would happen once the network settled, when the machines stopped merely reacting and began anticipating. The machines that began predicting, moving from coverage to comprehension. The network started showing a behavior that unsettled even the people who built it. Without any mystical awakening, units began anticipating where pressure would matter a few seconds before sensors proved it, leaning into a corner just as a small heat signature reconsidered a dash and retreated, shifting weight toward a vent before a whisker appeared. This was not consciousness. It was optimization, driven by a chorus of micro-failures remembered and recombined. The system was not thinking. It was listening at scale. Engineers argued about metaphors, while the city learned something simpler. When a presence is consistent enough, habits break. Rats reallocated their courage to later hours. They hugged seams instead of sprinting across open lots. The midday arrogance that had crept into too many places receded, replaced by an older rhythm that treated bright spaces as expensive. Still, instinct needed evidence, and the city wanted numbers to match the intuition humming through its alleys. Proof that you can count, and proof that you can feel. Moving from anecdote to evidence, the measurements began lining up with the mood. Service calls dipped week after week in neighborhoods where units settled into a routine. Power outage reports traced to gnawing fell to a fraction of their former pace. Health inspections noted fewer traces behind kitchens with chronic problems. Grocery managers quietly ordered fewer traps because fewer incidents demanded them. School custodians reported that lunch hours grew calmer, not due to speeches, but because corridors that once hosted daylight scurries regained their quiet. These were not miracles, they were maintenance, tallied, and yet residents described something data struggled to measure. An ease in the shoulders, a willingness to linger in a backlot without listening for the faint tap that used to send people inside a little sooner. The city did not become pristine. It became predictable in the right ways again. Yet the most surprising shift didn't happen in the shadows, it happened in the people who walked past the machines every day. The machines that changed people, moving from rodents to residents. Los Angeles discovered an unexpected outcome. One that no engineer had designed for, yet everyone began to notice. The robotic cats didn't just disrupt rat behavior, they altered human behavior too. People acted differently when a quiet, watchful presence occupied the same alley. Smokers who once flicked crumbs toward the curb now stamped them out. Night shift workers who used to leave dumpsters a few inches open tugged them fully shut, as if the machine's slow, patient posture reminded them that shortcuts always invite trouble. Businesses rewrote their own routines. Fewer makeshift props holding doors ajar, tighter timing on trash runs, steadier lighting in corners that had once relied on darkness to hide bad habits. What emerged wasn't fear, it was accountability shaped by subtle influence. The robots weren't enforcers. They had no authority, no ability to punish, no voice to shame. They were reminders with pause, and reminders have a way of changing behavior that lectures never can. The presence reshaped rhythm from the ground up, turning private habits into communal responsibility. Transitioning from enthusiasm to scrutiny, criticism inevitably followed. Some insisted the robotic cats were surveillance systems dressed in harmless silhouettes. Others feared they might confuse real pets, disrupt bird patterns, or simply frighten residents walking home after dusk. A few argued that a city shouldn't trade one kind of anxiety for another. The project leaders responded by opening every window into how the machines functioned. They published exactly what the units could and could not see: no faces, no voices, no personal identifiers, only motion fields and thermal traces tied to location rather than people. Release schedules were revised to avoid migration periods for local wildlife. The machines were taught to yield respectfully to real cats and dogs, backing away instead of posturing. Public trust didn't grow from marketing. It grew from Edit's clear, repeated proof that the project could adapt without losing its purpose. The work, the failures, and the return of ordinary, moving from principle to practice, revealed a simple truth: machines don't maintain themselves. An entire ecosystem of human labor kept the system honest. Technicians wiped grit from gimbals and replaced actuators before friction grew audible. Behavior designers refined half-second variations in head turns to make posture read as caution rather than threat. Data analysts pored over maps until new corridors emerged like faint riverbeds. Dispatchers learned to reroute units around street fairs, and volunteers filed reports on tiny details no sensor could capture: loose gates, new fences, burnt-out bulbs that turned safe alleys into permissive shadows. Then came the real tests. A heat wave knocked units into thermal fatigue, leaving them slumped beside dumpsters until cooling shrouds could be fitted. A teenager stole a unit for a joyride and gave the city a 2-day PR headache. A software update misfired, sending several units into identical aggressive postures outside a morning market. A festival that failed cleanup duties turned a well-managed corridor into a buffet overnight. Resilience came from learning. Cooling shrouds became standard in hot districts. Anti-theft alarms were installed, loud but harmless. Posture libraries gained guardrails to prevent synchronized intimidation. Festival permits added same-night cleanup inspections. The system improved not because it avoided mistakes, but because it refused to repeat them. Transitioning from chaos back to calm, the clearest evidence of success appeared in tiny erasures. A custodian deleted the daily reminder to check the planter before lunch. An electrician realized an entire heat wave had passed without a single gnaw-related outage. A deli owner moved the broom away from the back door because he no longer reached for it out of reflex. Parents let their children finish sandwiches on park benches without hovering. When ordinary finally returned, another truth surfaced, one that made the machines feel less like gadgets and more like philosophy. Nature, copied gently, becomes design. Moving from results to meaning, the project clarified a principle more durable than any hardware. Cities function best when their rules borrow from the logic of the life they host. Predation in nature is not a bloodbath, it is punctuation. It makes certain choices costly, so the whole story reads more clearly. The machines imitated that punctuation without demanding a food chain pay for it. Rats did not vanish. They recalibrated their confidence, resumed the shadows that belong to them in a city where people live and work in the daylight. Humans, for their part, realized that the technology did not absolve them of care. It rewarded it. Lids closed because it felt proper. Alleys lit because darkness now read as permission, not privacy. Maintenance became proof of intention instead of evidence of failure. Understanding the principle was one thing. Turning it into something other places could borrow without breaking it was another challenge entirely. A blueprint other places can actually use. Moving from the local to the transferable, the lessons that matter are almost embarrassingly practical. Do not flood a district with devices. Seed a corridor with just enough presence to turn shortcuts into detours. Pair every unit on the ground with a unit of human labor in the logbook. If the people cannot sustain the maintenance, the machines will rot into scenery. Publish what the devices record and what they never will, and keep promises with code, not slides. Expect seasons to break your perfect graphs and build budget lines for that messiness. Coordinate with wildlife advocates early enough that the criticisms you receive are edits you can make rather than verdicts you must endure. And teach the public over and over that the most powerful part of the plan is not the machine. It is the habit the machine rewards. With the blueprint stable, the next questions were no longer about rats at all. They were about possibility. A wider horizon for quiet machines. Moving from pest control to possibility. Once the city understood that a machine can imitate a meaningful cue without pretending to be the animal itself, new ideas emerged. Could robotic owls shepherd pigeons away from delicate landmarks without harm? Could gentle mechanical pollinators, scheduled with care, support gardens where wild pollinators are struggling until the habitat recovers enough to carry the load alone? Could similar posture-based presences guide coyotes towards safer crossings at night, reducing collisions without fencing landscapes into pieces? The lesson was not to mechanize the wild. The lesson was to imitate one law at a time with respect, and to leave room for living things to do what machines never should. Yet, all the speculation circled back to one truth that caught everyone off guard: why this worked, and why it kept working, what no one expected, and why it lasted. Moving from novelty to normal, the truly surprising part was not that robotic cats changed rat behavior. Any ecologist could have guessed that a consistent predator signal would tilt the math. The surprise was how quickly a city could relearn maintenance, once a quiet presence reminded it what mattered. The machines made people better at being neighbors. They turned 1,000 small temptations into a handful of better habits. They offered a way to enforce courtesy without tickets, to reward attention without applause, to make daylight boldness costly without rage or poison. They worked because they were accurate rather than loud, patient rather than theatrical, and adjustable rather than absolute. And once the surprise settled, the project revealed its real gift, a method any city could start tomorrow if it dared to look honestly at itself. The closing of one loop and the opening of another. Moving from story to invitation, Los Angeles did not solve a mystery so much as demonstrate a method. Start by reading your own rhythms without flattery. Identify the places where permission hides inside routine. Introduce a presence that adds cost to the mistake and relief to the habit you want. Maintain it with the boring love that keeps everything worth having intact. Publish your edits. Apologize with fixes, not press releases. And accept that balance is not a trophy. It is a practice. If your city tried a version of this, what corridor would you claim first? What habit would you make expensive? And what ordinary piece would you like to see return? The future of urban life will not be measured by spectacle alone. It will be measured by the quiet streets where nothing dramatic happens because someone, somewhere, made sure the watchers are in the right place and the lids are closed. All that remained was to return to the ground, to the rooftops and alleys where the work continues quietly, one evening at a time. Dusk, a rooftop, and the work that continues. Moving from the page to the image. The evening is warm, and a unit perches where a rutting of roof tar meets the chill breath of night air. It angles its head toward a vent and then away, choosing watchfulness over movement. Down on the sidewalk, a worker drops a bag into a bin and closes the latch that used to dangle. Across the block, a young cat alive, real, amused by everything pads along a ledge, and glances at the machine without alarm. In a command room, a technician notes a slowdown along a corridor that had flared the night before and smiles because the repair held. None of it asks for applause. All of it adds up to a city that breathes a little easier. Los Angeles laughed at the idea. Then the laughter stopped. The robotic cat stayed, habits shifted, outages dropped, and the streets remembered how to behave. It turned out the technology wasn't the story design was. A quiet presence made boldness expensive again, without poison or panic. Now it's your turn. What ordinary moment would you bring back to your neighborhood? A clean alley, a calmer lunch break, a park bench without uninvited guests? Share your answer in the comments. We read everyone. And if you want more stories where smart design fixes real problems, hit like and subscribe.